My name is Caleb Mercer, and at 49 I thought I had built a life carved from grit, discipline, and sacrifice. For the past 21 years, I'd worked overseas as a senior safety engineer in Antarctica's harshest research stations, keeping oil rigs and climate stations operational in temperatures most people couldn't even imagine. My wife Leona and I had been married for 17 years. She stayed in Phoenix while I rotated in and out 3 months on, 1 month off. It wasn't perfect, but the pay was astronomical, and we always said it was for our future. Until one morning at 4:12 a.m., buried in the snow and silence of the southern polar base, I received a text that shattered everything. "It's over. I've met someone. He's 26 and makes me feel alive again. I've taken our savings and moved to Miami. Don't bother calling. If this made your blood boil already, type justice in the comments." I stared at the screen for a full minute, the frost biting at my fingers. Then another message arrived. A screenshot of our joint bank account. $217,000. Now 027. Below it she added a winking face. My gloves creaked as I clenched the phone. But I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't even reply. I placed the phone in my parka and walked into the snow to finish my shift. A few colleagues noticed I skipped meals and didn't joke like I usually did. But no one asked. In a place where -50 wind chills could kill you, emotional outbursts weren't currency you could afford to spend. That night, back in my quarters, I logged into our shared cloud drive. It was empty. Photos gone. Documents deleted. As if I'd been wiped from her life. But she missed one thing. Our shared filing folder from years ago. Hidden deep in a subdirectory. Mercer Hold 01. It still contained backups of all our financials, including a spreadsheet I had forgotten existed. In it were detailed notes I had taken over the years, mapping out investment transfers I made into a private holding account under my late mother's surname Bronson. At the time it was just about future-proofing. Now it would become something else entirely. The next morning I wrote a short email to my brother-in-law Julian, a forensic auditor in Austin. "Protocol Gray Sky," I typed. A code phrase we had once created after watching a friend lose everything in a bitter divorce. Within 5 minutes he responded, "Activated. Sit tight, do not engage." He was the kind of man who didn't need instructions, just direction. I shut down the base computer and took a deep breath. I had another 10 days left before I could be rotated back to the mainland. 10 days while my wife played house with some gym instructor on my dime, probably drinking cocktails by the beach. When I returned to my bunk, my team lead, Dr. Rivas, stopped me at the door. "You good?" he asked, his tone neutral but firm. I gave a single nod. "Everything's secure," I said. And it was, because Leona thought I'd be broken. Thought I'd beg. But what she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for something like this longer than she'd been planning to run. She thought I was far away, and I was, but I was also closer than she'd ever feared. She had no idea the trap had already begun closing the moment she pressed send. The return trip from Antarctica to the US wasn't quick. 4 flights, 2 layovers, and enough silence to think through every piece of the betrayal again and again. Every time I looked out the airplane window I didn't see clouds. I saw clues. The unexpected ATM withdrawals from 2 months ago. The canceled trip she said was just too exhausting to plan. The sudden obsession with spin classes and girls' weekends to South Beach. My mind connected dots with the precision of an engineer and the rage of a husband who had been quietly replaced. By the time I landed in Houston, Julian was waiting curbside. Expression unreadable. He handed me a prepaid phone and a hard envelope. "Read this in the car," he said simply. The documents inside confirmed what I suspected and worse. Leona had been siphoning funds for nearly 13 months. Slowly at first $1,500 here, $2,700 there, but ramping up the last 90 days. All transferred into an account under her maiden name. She'd even withdrawn early from my Roth IRA using forged e-signatures. She was clever, Julian muttered as we drove toward his house. But not clever enough to know about the Bronson Trust. He smiled slightly. And certainly not clever enough to realize I used to work for the IRS. That night in Julian's study we began the quiet build of my counterstrike. I wasn't interested in just reclaiming my money. I wanted the truth dragged into daylight. I wanted the world to see what kind of person she really was. First we froze her access to all remaining accounts. Then we submitted a fraud report on the forged IRA withdrawal. But the real game changer came when Julian opened a folder labeled Hatchback. Inside were synced messages from a backup of Leona's iCloud. She'd never changed the login tied to our shared Apple account. Every message, every call log, every photo, archived. including dozens of exchanges with someone named T. T turned out to be Travis Bell, 26 years old, a failed MMA fighter turned celebrity fitness coach who bounced from client to client, mostly older women, a grifter in gym clothes. Their texts were riddled with laughing emojis about my dumb Antarctic job and plans to buy a property in Miami once the money hit. One message in particular twisted in my gut. He won't even see it coming. I'll say my mom's sick. He'll sign whatever. Another. We should up the insurance policy, just in case he gets icy down there. Julian highlighted those last two lines. These are gold, he said. Textbook insurance manipulation. Add this to the forged IRA request and we've got enough to trigger a federal review. I stared at the screen. Betrayal was one thing. Premeditated theft and insurance planning, that was another level of evil. And now, she had no idea I knew. She thought I was thousands of miles away, but I was home, quiet. Watch. The next step came quietly. We contacted my attorney, Sophia Grant, a civil shark with a background in financial crime. I forwarded her the entire dossier. Her reply came within 15 minutes. This is going to be fun. Sophia wasn't interested in delay. She began drafting a civil suit for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, and an emergency petition to freeze all assets tied to Leona's name and Travis Bell's LLC. In one day we'd gone from blindsided husband to ticking legal warhead. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Let her dance a little longer on the edge of comfort. Let her think the money was hers. Because she wasn't just going to lose the money. She was going to lose the illusion that she'd ever been in control. 3 days passed, and I didn't send a single word to Leona. But she tried calls, voicemails, panic texts to my original number. Caleb, please call me. The bank froze everything. There's been a misunderstanding. I was just trying to move our funds to a safer place. I need you. The desperation in her voice would have rattled a weaker man. But I had seen the messages. I knew the truth. This wasn't fear of confusion. It was fear of exposure. She'd thought this would be clean, silent, that I'd be too far away, too broken, too slow. But now the cracks were forming and she felt it. Julian leaned back in his chair as we listened to her voicemails on speaker. She's scrambling. That means the money freeze worked. But it's not just the bank accounts anymore. Sophia pulled the deed records. Leona listed your house in Phoenix for a quick sale. She forged your signature on the listing documents. I closed my eyes and breathed through the fury that rose in my chest. That house had been my father's. I'd rebuilt the porch with my own hands after he passed. She was selling it behind my back like it was some item off Craigslist. And then the twist. Julian tapped a folder open on his screen. You need to see this. Inside were photos, screenshots from an anonymous source we'd tapped inside a private Facebook group for Miami real estate clients. It was Leona and Travis, giving a tour of their new home. The one they'd already placed a deposit on with part of my drained savings. A gated community with palm trees, a pool and a view of the bay. Move-in date was supposed to be next Friday. Julian muttered, they don't know the funds are frozen yet. But they will. It was time for me to see it all with my own eyes. I booked a quiet room in a Phoenix hotel under an alias. Across the street from my own house, Julian had already installed hidden surveillance inside the property 2 years ago. When I'd briefly suspected a burglary incident, another thing Leona must have forgotten. I accessed the feed from my laptop that night, and there he was, Travis shirtless, sipping my whiskey on my porch swing, the one I'd built for Leona's birthday. He laughed as he spoke into a phone. Moments later, Leona stepped outside and kissed him like they were on vacation. Watching her laugh, watching him wear my clothes, in my home, surrounded by the life I built, it didn't break me, it focused me. Because revenge isn't rage, it's calculation, it's patience. And they were too arrogant to know they were standing on a landmine. Every word they said, every item they moved, every document they signed, recorded and cataloged. They didn't know it yet, but the evidence folder labeled Mercer case was already being built for court. That night I drafted a simple handwritten letter. You erased me like I was disposable. But you forgot, ice doesn't break, it waits. And now, so do I. I didn't send it. I burned it. It wasn't for her. It was for me. A final page turned before the storm began. The next morning, Sophia called. Emergency hearing is scheduled. 3 days. We're presenting the full case: fraud, asset concealment, forgery, and a motion to recover all funds. Also, your neighbor across the street? She sent us photos of a moving truck outside your house today. My jaw clenched. They're planning to disappear, I said. Let's make sure they don't get far. The morning of the hearing arrived with a strange calm. I stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, dressed in a plain navy suit, holding a folder that contained every lie Leona thought she got away with. Across from me she sat with her attorney, nervous, whispering, avoiding my gaze. Travis wasn't there. According to Sophia's private investigator, he had booked a one-way ticket to Puerto Rico 2 days earlier, abandoning the sinking ship just in time. Leona still hadn't realized the full weight of what was coming, but she. Judge Mendelsohn entered the courtroom with the authority of someone who'd seen too many cases like this, but rarely with this much documentation. Sophia opened with quiet precision, laying out the timeline: months of hidden financial transfers, evidence of signature forgery on real estate documents, and the insurance scheme that had begun to take shape through Leona's texts. The judge listened intently. Then Sophia introduced the synced phone backups. Every message between Leona and Travis. Every mocking joke. Every dollar drain. When we reached the part about the forged IRA withdrawal and the attempt to list our Phoenix home for sale, the judge stopped reading and looked directly at Leona. Mrs. Mercer, are you aware of the penalties for financial fraud involving retirement accounts and property deeds? Leona stammered, glancing helplessly at her lawyer. Your Honor, this has been a misunderstanding. Caleb works overseas. I didn't know how to reach him. I was just scared. But her voice shook, because she knew the mountain of evidence crushed her excuses before they ever left her lips. Then came the coup de grace. A compilation video from my home surveillance cameras, showing Travis living in my home, Leona's casual admissions and their private conversations. We had to mute the audio in court, but the body language alone told 1,000 truths. Sophia leaned in and whispered, "She's done." The judge sat back, folding his hands. "I've seen enough." Immediate injunction. All marital and disputed assets are frozen. Mrs. Mercer is hereby barred from selling, transferring, or using any funds pending investigation. Miss Mercer's exclusive rights to the Phoenix property are reinstated. Leona gasped, visibly trembling. Her lawyer asked for a recess. Denied. The court officer handed her a notice. Fraud charges had already been referred to the district attorney. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was criminal. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply looked at her one last time. Her eyes were wide, not with remorse but fear, because the fantasy was unraveling, thread by thread, right in front of her. Outside the courtroom, Sophia turned to me. She's going to lose everything: house, assets, possibly even her freedom. I nodded. But it wasn't over. I want to see it, with my own eyes. When they try to run, when the final blow lands, I need to be there. Sophia gave me a long look. Then it's time to go back to Phoenix. The trucks are scheduled to finish clearing the house tomorrow morning. We'll have the sheriff ready. I arrived back in Phoenix just after midnight. Julian had arranged everything: transport, a place to stay, and surveillance from across the street. The home I once built with my bare hands was now a staging ground for one final performance. I stayed in an upstairs guest room at Miss Alden's, my elderly neighbor who had quietly documented every suspicious vehicle, every moving truck, every unfamiliar face that had passed through my driveway in the last 3 weeks. She thinks you're still overseas, Mrs. Alden whispered as she passed me a warm mug of tea. She has no idea you've been watching her this whole time. From her living room window I had a perfect view of the front of my house. It looked like a shell of what it once was. Boxes stacked on the porch. My tools scattered across the lawn. The porch swing missing. My swing, the one I built the year Leona's mother died because she said she wanted a quiet place to cry. I felt nothing now but an icy stillness, and beneath that, anticipation. This wasn't grief anymore. This was justice taking form. At 7:42 a.m., the final moving truck rolled into the driveway. 2 men began unloading the last of what she had taken: my grandfather's watch, my woodworking tools, framed photos of my childhood that I had digitized years ago, but kept in their original frames. They were all loaded onto a dolly like trash. Then at 8:07 a.m., Leona stepped out wearing sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, talking fast into her phone, clearly stressed. I couldn't hear her words, but her frantic pacing said everything. At 8:45 a.m., a black SUV pulled up and parked diagonally across her driveway. From it stepped 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies, followed by a woman in a dark gray blazer, Sophia's assistant from court. I stood and walked quietly out the side door, crossed the street, and stood just at the edge of my own yard. I wanted her to see me when everything collapsed. I wanted that final frame to burn into her memory. The deputy rang the bell. Leona opened the door, distracted, only to freeze when she saw the officers. She said something I couldn't hear, then turned pale as Sophia's assistant handed her the stack of court documents. That's when I stepped into view. Her head whipped around, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Her mouth parted, her eyes wide. "Caleb," she whispered, You're supposed to be." I raised a hand, signaling silence. "You have 15 minutes, the deputy said calmly. "You're permitted to remove personal items only, clothing, toiletries. Everything else remains until the court-appointed inventory team arrives." Travis wasn't with her. I imagined he was already halfway to some other city, repeating his usual script with another naive woman and another bank account to drain. But that wasn't my concern anymore. As Leona was escorted inside, I turned back toward the street. I didn't need to watch her pack. I'd already seen enough. Some betrayals steal your heart, but others, they sharpen your focus, and now the reckoning was only beginning. By the time the moving truck rolled away empty and the deputies locked the front door behind them, Leona had nothing left but a duffel bag in her trembling hands. She stood in the driveway looking lost for the first time since this all began. Sophia's assistant gave her the final notice. The house was now off-limits pending legal division and asset inventory. Everything she'd packed, every heirloom she'd stolen, every item she'd stuffed into boxes for her next life, all of it now locked behind doors she no longer had keys to. Back at Julian's house, we reviewed the footage again. Every step had been recorded. The signing of forged documents, the illegal withdrawals, even her discussions about making it look accidental with Travis in the texts. "It's more than enough for the DA," Julian said. "She won't serve time, most likely. But the restitution, the fines, she'll be paying that off for the next 20 years. I didn't smile. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about taking back the power she thought she'd stolen when she pressed send on that text from Miami. But just when we thought the damage was done, the next blow landed from an unexpected place. Sophia received a call from a young woman in Tampa claiming to be Travis Bell's ex-fiancée. Her name was Cassie Vaughn, and her story was almost identical. Older woman, financially secure, groomed and manipulated by Travis, then left with her accounts drained. "He's done this before," she told Sophia. "At least 4 times. He changes cities' names sometimes, but always the same pattern." Cassie had photos, texts, even a restraining order. She was ready to testify if needed. It gave us something powerful, a pattern. With multiple victims, the DA now had the option to pursue criminal conspiracy charges against both Travis and Leona. If we could prove that she knew about his past and evidence suggested she did, they'd both be held liable. Sophia filed a motion immediately to include Cassie's statements in the complaint. Now this wasn't just a personal revenge story. It was a legal reckoning with ripple effects that might follow them both for years. Meanwhile, Leona began calling again, using blocked numbers, fake names, even messaging me through an old email I hadn't checked in years. Her tone had changed. No more anger, just panic, desperation. "I was manipulated," she wrote. "I didn't know what Travis was doing. I thought we were in love. Please don't destroy me." But I didn't respond. The time for conversation had passed. If she had ever doubted who I was beneath the uniform, beneath the long-distance work schedule, beneath the quiet she now knew. You don't survive 20 winters in Antarctica by reacting to storms. You survive by preparing for them. 3 weeks after the emergency hearing, the full weight of the fallout began crashing down on Leona. The court had ruled in my favor on every front. All jointly owned assets were placed in my name. Her access to accounts was revoked, and the Phoenix home, my home, was officially returned to me with a restraining order filed to prevent her from setting foot on the property again. But it was what happened after that made the ending more poetic than anything I could have planned. Travis had vanished again. Cassie's tip led us to find similar complaints in New Mexico, Oregon, and Texas. Leona had believed she was starting a new life. Instead, she'd been recruited into a predator's next con, and now that the funds were frozen and legal proceedings mounting, Travis disappeared with what little cash she had left. He took her jewelry, electronics, even her laptop, and as Sophia's PI confirmed, he boarded a flight to Belize 2 days before her emergency hearing, using a fake name, James Tillman. His trail went cold from there. I got the final notification from the court via Sophia. The DA had agreed to press charges for conspiracy and fraud. Leona would face criminal restitution, probation, and a permanent mark on her record. No prison, just the slow burn of public shame and financial ruin. And I requested one final stipulation, that her name be permanently removed from all remaining trusts, properties and insurance policies. Not because I feared what she might do, but because I didn't want a single corner of my legacy attached to hers. The morning after the ruling, I returned to the Phoenix house alone. The movers had finished clearing out what was mine. Julian had helped restore the few heirlooms she hadn't pawned. I stepped inside and let the silence settle. It felt strange walking through the space she had once claimed as her kingdom. Every wall now stripped, every trace of her erased. I walked out to the backyard, sat on the edge of the porch and looked at the empty spot where my swing once hung. I'd build a new one, stronger. That evening I received a voicemail. Her voice was brittle. "Caleb, I don't know where to go. He's gone. Everything's gone. I was wrong. Please, don't let it end like this." I saved the message but didn't reply. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She had chosen the path. She had set the trap. She never imagined I'd be the one quietly holding the blueprint to dismantle it. Because revenge doesn't roar. It waits. And when it comes, it doesn't ask for permission. It simply finishes what betrayal began. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of a small cabin nestled in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. My new home, purchased quietly through the Bronson Trust years before Leona ever sent that fateful message. 40 acres of pine and solitude. No neighbors for miles, just the sound of wind slipping through trees and the quiet rhythmic creak of the new porch swing I'd built myself. It was stronger than the last one. Everything in my life now. The Phoenix house had sold at full market value. The proceeds sat untouched in a high-yield account. The court had finalized the divorce, and Leona was ordered to pay restitution monthly. Though Sophia and I both knew she'd never be able to keep up. Last I heard, she was living with a distant cousin in Tulsa, working retail and still blaming everyone but herself. Travis Bell, meanwhile, had become a ghost. No confirmed sightings since Belize. Another woman, another life. But I left that to the justice system. My chapter with them was closed. One afternoon, Julian called just to check in. "Funny how quiet life gets when there's no fire to put out," he joked. I laughed and thanked him for everything. Without him, I would have lost more than money. I might have lost myself in the rage. But instead, we turned that rage into resolve, into action, into a cold, deliberate kind of justice. The kind that doesn't yell, the kind that doesn't post, the kind that simply shows up, watches everything burn and walks away untouched. As the sun dipped behind the ridgeline, I poured a glass of bourbon and opened the final envelope Brendan had mailed me. Inside was the official dissolution of the Bronson Trust. All assets legally mine now. No more contingency plans. No more protocols. I folded the paper, placed it in the drawer beside me, and leaned back in the swing. No one was looking for me. No one was calling my name with an agenda. For the first time in decades, I didn't owe anyone a single explanation. And that's when I realized the revenge wasn't the court ruling, the frozen accounts, or the public exposure. The real revenge was the silence, the life they couldn't touch, the peace they never saw coming. Because while they had been plotting betrayal, I'd been building escape routes. While they planned a future without me, I'd crafted a future they could never enter. So when people ask me now what I did when my wife tried to take everything, I tell them the truth. I let her. Then I took back more than she ever knew existed.